For context, my grandfather has lived and worked on the same farm for his entire life. It's a 100-acre farm, and for as long as he's been around, he's been constantly out and about doing whatever he needs to get work done on his farm. When my grandmother's own grandfather passed away, he left my grandfather, which was my grandma's husband, his Scottish Rite Freemason ring, and thought that because he was a Mason, he would wear it. However, he wasn't a member of the Scottish Rite sect, so he refused to wear the ring until he joined that sect of Freemasonry. He went through all the steps of which I have no clue what they are, and eventually became a member of the Scottish Rite, and was able to wear the ring. The ring meant a lot to him, as it was both passed to him through family, and he also had to work really hard to become a member of the Scottish Rite so that he could wear it. But one day, he came in from work on the farm, and lo and behold, it had fallen off at some point. He and my grandmother were both rightfully devastated and scoured the property to find the ring. However, they were unable to locate the ring anywhere on the property. This all happened about 5 years ago or so, but flash forward to the present time, and my mom is vacuuming out her new car of about 6 months that she had already taken up to the family farm, probably about twice. As she's vacuuming the back, she notices a ring and thinks it's just some novelty ring, but then takes a close look and sees masonry symbol and decides to take it up to the family farm on her next trip. Assuming that because my grandfather is a Freemason, he may know something about the symbol. About a month later, she goes and shows my grandfather, who immediately tears up and recognizes the ring right away, knowing what it is. No one has absolutely any clue how it got there, given that it had almost been lost to oblivion for years, and all of a sudden, it just appears in my mom's back seat of her car. It's a pretty crazy story and almost too unbelievable, but it's 100% real. Last night I was ready to go to sleep while the TV was left on, and a cartoon named Johnny Test came on. I was already dozing off when a random memory appeared in my mind for some reason. It was a memory of going to a haunted house. I was waiting in line in the dark, and when the light flashed, it meant to proceed ahead into the cornfield. Anyways, the light flashed, and Jason Voorhees popped out of the dark and scared you. Then my daughter woke me up to get her bottle. I get her a bottle and give it to her, and I try to go back to sleep, and I hear a chainsaw going off on the TV. I open my eyes, and the dog in the dookie is wearing a hockey mask and wielding the chainsaw. It freaked me out, and I couldn't go back to sleep. I've never seen the episode, just for the record. I got a new teaching job after being unemployed since last November, since my last school went out of business. I've only worked at 4 schools my entire adult life. I walked in on my first day and spotted a student from the previous school that I knew, and ran up to her and gave her a big hug. Then another student yelled, "Miss," and I yelled back, "Oh God, Bob." Bob obviously was not this student's name, but that's just what I'll call him for the story. We're all hugging, and it's wonderful. Hallmark moment, right? Fast forward, and my boss goes, "You know Bob?" "How do you know Bob?" And I said, "I taught him at my last school." My boss goes, "Really?" Because I told Bob's parents how excited he was to see you, and they said that he'd never been to that school before. So I'm thinking. I get home and I start looking back at school photos I took on my iPhone, class photos, and this boy isn't in any of them. So I text some former coworkers that I keep in touch with from all those other schools. Not only do they not know Bob, the student in question, they've never had anybody named Bob as a student. It's been a week since that incident, and me and his parents and my boss are still trying to figure all this out. His parents even asked him where he knows me from, and he says, "I don't know, I just do." He's 4, so that's an appropriate response, right? I guess it's some kind of a conspiracy theory on my part. Maybe we met in a past life, or maybe an alternate version of ourselves met in some other reality. I'm with my girlfriend all day. Then at around 8 p.m. her sister calls and says that she and her husband were at an event and he was stung by a bee. He's allergic, so they need to go to the hospital fast. My girlfriend is put on standby to collect them from the event and then take them to the hospital if they need it. However, I must say her sister is terrible at keeping us posted as to what's going on, eventually messaging, "All good, we're at the hospital now. But would you maybe be able to pick us up? Our friends who dropped us need to go home. We'll let you know if we need you." So now we're on standby and we're waiting to find out if we need to collect them. Anyways, it gets very late and we pass out, assuming that if they need us, they'd call. We wake up in the morning and her sister had messaged during the night to say that they were all good and got a lift home from his parents, safe and sound. My girlfriend sees that she has 2 voicemails from a private number. For the story's sake, I'll use names. Let's call my girlfriend Jane, her sister Anna, and her brother-in-law Cody. And the caller will call Linda. So having found the first voicemail, the exact wording in a lady's voice states, "Hello Jane, it's Linda speaking. One of our nurses from," and the hospital name is mumbled, however. After we tried to figure out what the hospital name was, it didn't sound anything like the hospital we were at. It was a different name. She continues, "We have Cody, who's just woken up. Right this minute. Right 10 seconds, probably. He's resting at the moment, but you're welcome to come by and get him whenever. Just come up from the ward to the front of the reception and tell them what you're here for, and they'll send you right through." After that, we found the second voicemail, and this is the exact wording of the second voicemail. "Hi, this is Linda speaking. One of the nurses in Haikum. I've got Cody, who had just woken up, so if you'd like to come and see him, okay, bye." It was very confusing. The hospital isn't one that Anna or Cody were at. None of us have even heard the name of that hospital. It's definitely not a local place or even in our state. We live in Western Australia. Jane checks with Anna. Anna is adamant that she never provided Jane's details to the hospital. She didn't need to. We weren't emergency contacts. Upon checking the time that the voicemails were received, or after Anna and Cody had left the hospital, the number was private, so we couldn't call back. Google doesn't turn up any results for the hospital name that she gave us. It's all very puzzling and mysterious. We purchased a condo on Lake Michigan. My husband was moving in and I was downstate 3 hours away, still packing boxes. Hubby and I had iPhones at the time. It was the year 2012. I called my husband to see how things were going. During my call with him, another call had beeped in, and lo and behold, it's my husband's cell phone number, even though I was already on the phone with him. So I jokingly told husband number 1 that he was calling me on the other line. So I put him on hold and took the call. And it was indeed my husband. He said that he was on his way home and asked me if I had any plans for dinner. And I said, "Where are you?" And he said that he was already in town. "I can grab something if you want." I said, "Just a minute," and went back to my first husband and I told him what was going on, and he said he could hear our conversation and that he heard his own voice. I went back to hubby number 2, but nobody was on the line anymore. The phone registered both numbers at the same time, with the second one disconnecting while I was still talking to my husband on the first line, my first husband, I guess, about the conversation that I just had with him on the other line. It is now 2021 and I still can't shake that call, and how weird and strange it all was to be talking to the same person on 2 different lines. I know it wasn't any kind of a practical joke on my husband's part, but how is that even possible? How could I have a conversation with the same person on 2 different lines? It's pretty baffling to me. I wasn't going to post this here because it really doesn't make sense and I'm not sure what to make of it at all. Basically, I've worn the same ring on my thumb since I was 12 or 13. It's super special to me and I plan on wearing it for the rest of my life. A couple of days ago, I realized that it wasn't on my thumb. I went crazy looking for it because I said, it's special to me. I never take it off, ever. I shower with it on, and there's no way that it could have just slipped off because it's always on my thumb, and it's always on there really tight. It made me super sad for a couple of days to think that I would never see my little ring again, but I forced myself to move on. As silly as it sounds, I was really attached to that ring. I genuinely had accepted the fact that this ring that I had would not be returning. Until 2 days ago, I was going to use the restroom and something told me to look at my thumb, and there was a ring sitting on top of another ring that I had previously used to replace my favorite ring. So I had 2 rings on my thumb, one being this crappy ring that I used to replace my good ring because I lost it, and the other one being my treasured lost ring. I really don't even know how this makes any sense. I am 100% positive that I did not put this ring back on my finger at all. I would have remembered because I've been looking for this ring manically for days. So yeah, I'm glad it's back, and I'm not going to question it too much because I'm glad to have my old ring back. I think in some strange way this ring is meant to be with me for whatever reason, and that's why it came back. I live in a humid place that gets foggy from time to time. One day I was out, and the fog was so thick you could see only a few meters ahead of you. It was a bit unnerving because you couldn't see anything in front or behind you, just a small bubble directly around you that was visible. I decided to go walking along the beach. It was fairly cold, so I was the only one outside. The tide from the ocean had just pulled away from the shore, and I was walking on the freshly wet sand because I love the squishing sound it makes beneath my boots. I walked the length of the beach toward the south and turned around to go back north. I glanced at my phone, and I only had 8% battery life left. As I walked back, I noticed something very peculiar. I felt a sense of deja vu come over me, like this wasn't the first time. I glanced down at the ground and saw that my footprints going from across the beach were missing. And there were no southbound footprints at all, only footprints in the front of me going north in the direction that I was already going. As I stepped into them, my boots fit in them perfectly. They were definitely my prints. The gait and size and the shoe matched mine perfectly. I looked around and I was flabbergasted. There was nobody else on the beach with me. I took out my phone to take a picture, and surprisingly, my battery was charged at 13%. However, I was so frightened and spooked that I didn't end up taking any kind of picture of anything. I was just so scared for some reason I just got the hell out of there and didn't look back. I think I might have gotten caught up in some kind of a time loop or time slip while I was walking in the fog. My rescue cat Luna is 2 and is finally comfortable enough to sleep at the foot of my bed. She's an absolute tank and takes up a lot of space by my feet when I sleep, but it's still nice. I have a type of insomnia where when I wake up in the middle of the night, I am wide awake and have a hard time going back to sleep. Last night I woke up at 4 a.m. to go use the bathroom. I'm in the bathroom and I see her walk down the hallway past our other cat and towards the kitchen. He turns and looks at her too. I was slightly relieved because I thought now that the cat's gone I can have room to move my feet around when I go back to bed, and maybe, just maybe, I'll actually get to fall back to sleep. I get back to bed, and our bed is the opposite way down the hall from where she was just going. And as I'm going and rounding the corner of the bed, in the semi-dark, Luna meows at me. I put my hand down on the bed, and she's lying right where I left her. She hasn't moved. She couldn't have circled around and jumped up without me being aware of her. She's too huge for me not to notice. I stood there for a few minutes and just stared at her, trying to figure out what happened, and she stretches, hops off the bed, and runs down the hall, just like she did when I saw her. I still have no explanation, but I like the idea that she sleeps and runs around the house at the same time. At some point, I separated from this version that my friend and wife are in. This version of reality, I guess you could say. Last night I was over at my friend's house, we'll call her Amber, and we were chatting about family and growing up differently. She mentioned how she was cooking for her family since she was 8 years old, and when she was 14 she worked for a catering company and loved it. Then she said that she was going to go to culinary school. And I said, "But you did go to culinary school." And she said that she hadn't. But I have several distinct memories of us talking about her going to culinary school. I reminded her of the time my wife and I had dinner at her place. Amber said she would cook and would make stir fry. All of this she remembers too. When we got to her place, I was so impressed because she had a kitchen cabinet full of cookware and spices. We were young, and nobody I knew at that time had a kitchen that was so well stocked. When I made a comment on it, she said, "Well, yeah, I went to culinary school." And we had multiple conversations like that since. It's one of those things that I knew about her, and we talked about it throughout our entire 3-year friendship. But when I recounted that specific story to her about that during that particular evening, she said that everything that I had just mentioned was correct. The only thing that wasn't was that she went to culinary school. She reiterated again that she had never been to culinary school, that she had never even taken a class or anything. We stared at each other, shocked and a little bit speechless, and then I told her we must be from different versions of reality. She said she always wanted to go to culinary school but never did, and I told her that somewhere another Amber that I knew went to culinary school. I think that's pretty poetic and beautiful in some ways. When I get home, I asked my wife if she remembers Amber going to culinary school, and she said no right away. I recounted the whole conversation for her, and still she said no. But she and I have a lot of similar experiences with each other, so I'm really not surprised. I'm going to start to write things down from now on to learn about a new person so that I can refer back to what I write down about them. I wonder if anybody else knows about these kinds of experiences and what they think happened in my case.